What is golden, y'all? It's Brian back with the Tuesday night live stream. So on tonight's episode, I got some politics of the day. Um, but before we get too far into it, I do have a link for the community I started for the Blurting While Dad community. I'm waiting to get some people in there so we can start some conversations and get some balls rolling and stuff. But I'm going to be posting some of my older content in there. Really, I wanted a protected space for Black nerds to interact without all the racial trolls. And I think oftentimes we downplay the weird racism that Black people get online, especially when we talk specifically narrowly about ourselves. We're not necessarily allowed to almost have our own thoughts about ourselves out in public spaces. And so that's what this group is. It's the League of Extraordinary unks and aunties, and it's a Black nerd community that I'm trying to insulate from all the man versus woman stuff and all the other stuff that goes on. Um, Look at it like this: it will be a place ideally that we would actually be able to have intelligent conversations about adult relationships, and with the entire Clay and Meg thing, as opposed to devolving into a bunch of red pill dudes that are really too old to be red pill. Like you're at some point, you're too old to be an incel. You age out of the game, and I think that a lot of brothers my age are still locked into some real juvenile kind of stuff online in terms of interacting with women. I mean, seeing it all the time, or dudes will literally create posts just to pick fights with women, and that's I don't find any utility in that. So that's what the group is, kind of a hedge against that. So if you're interested, check me out. I'm be adding some content there later on this week. So I didn't necessarily plan on doing a particularly political episode, but I do need to spend a little time with the Voting Rights Act, just to discuss it a little bit and give my thoughts on it. Again, these are my thoughts. Nobody else's. It's just my kind of take on things. If you want to fight me about it, I really don't care. What's going on? How's it going, Roman? Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to give a little bit of shape to my thoughts regarding the Voting Rights Act, and then also talk about the BS myth about meritocracy and how that actually how it really plays out from a professional standpoint. As somebody who's held a number of professional titles and worked in professional contexts, and we're going to talk about my experiences with meritocracy, and why I think that sometimes I think it's kind of used as a shield for some BS. So let's get into it, and let's sit down and let's start chopping this fable here. So for those that haven't been following, and this is kind of my how after are we segment. Let's do the meritocracy one first, and then we'll talk the Voting Rights Act. So well, we'll do the Voting Rights Act first, since I got that first. Here's the thing. So basically what the Supreme Court did is basically said political districts can't be drawn on racial lines. And so in places down south in Louisiana, what's going on? How's it going? Thanks for tuning in. In the deep south, there are areas that are majority Black, but the way the maps were drawn up before, that vote of the Black people was diluted so that they never had any representation that looked like them or even belonged to their community. And so in the deep south, you had a whole swath of Black people that are essentially existing without representation, because the maps were drawn narrowly to exclude them from any seats of political power whenever possible. And when they couldn't do it that way, then back in the days, you had literacy tests. If you ever tried to take one of the literacy tests that they used to try to keep Black people from voting, these are impossible questions. And most people now, like, they're not made to be passed. Those literacy tests were not made for people to pass them. They were made to eliminate people, but there were poll taxes, literacy tests, all the other stuff. Now we're into gerrymandering. Gerrymandering essentially is drawing a district to gain a specific political advantage, essentially. And so what happened is this. Political gerrymandering is kind of treated differently as from racial gerrymandering. In the Runcho versus Common case, the Supreme Court said that partisan gerrymandering claims are political questions beyond federal court review. That means that federal courts will generally not step in because the map is aggressively drawn for party advantage. Racial gerrymandering is different because race-based districts can trigger constitutional scrutiny. So it falls under the purview of the Supreme Court if it's determined that a map is drawn along racial lines. But let's be honest here. What up? What up? How you doing? Thanks for tuning in. If we're going to get this chop in the fable here, a lot of times when you get to areas down south or stuff where you have heavy segregation, a lot of times a political map is a racially drawn map. It's just not explicitly stated as a racially drawn map, right? And so you can have a functionally white map that is drawn for a GOP person, and so that's really the thing. So on one hand, they're saying it's okay. On the other hand, they're saying it's not okay. If the element of race is involved in the decision-making process of drawing the map, it's not okay. And it could come under constitutional scrutiny according to the Supreme Court. But if it's along political lines, then that is not, it doesn't come under the purview of, it doesn't rise to the purview of the Supreme Court. That's what they're saying. But we know that the way the demographics of the party shake out, you can draw a GOP map, and that's essentially a white district. You can gerrymander it politically for Republicans, and it's going to be essentially a white district because that's just how the demographics of the party shake out. I'm not saying there aren't any black or brown people or indigenous people or whoever in the Republican Party. But what I am saying is when you look at the raw numbers and raw data, it's very clear about which party, who's represented in which party. Okay. And so that's kind of what came down. And their entire, like, I look at places like, I believe Louisiana's like 1/3 black, but when you look at how the representatives, specifically state representatives, they don't represent the community already. And now you're going to basically essentially, as these states start doing redrawing their maps along political lines, you're going to start seeing a functional purge of black representatives and brown representatives, and it's going to say, oh, well, it's not going to, they're not going to get purged if they are GOP representatives, but that's another story. Basically, a politically gerrymandered map is still a racially gerrymandered map. I mean, if we're being really honest here, I think the problem I have with the presentation of this, especially in the discourse I've seen online, I do not like the dishonesty. Like, I don't like when somebody is really super being dishonest about it and not standing 10 toes down on and say, yeah, I don't care. I'd much rather somebody, when I say, yeah, a bunch of black people about to lose their representation in the Deep South and all across the countries, depending on what state they're in, I'd rather the person say, yeah, I don't care, I want to win, than to try to give me a BS line about, well, I mean, people can still vote and blah, blah, blah. That's not the point. You're basically diluting the political power of a marginalized group already, whose political power is already diluted. So, and so the example I have is Louisiana is essentially 1/3 black. And the fight has been over whether black voters should have one or two congressional districts where they can realistically elect candidates of their choice. The recent Supreme Court fight around Louisiana's second majority black district shows the danger. Courts are demanding race and party be separated in places where map makers know they are deeply connected. And we all have to pretend like these two things are not related. Like we all got to be stupid and just pretend that specifically in Louisiana, where race and party are very, very intertwined. And have been for years, depending on which political party was considered progressive, which one was considered conservative. because it does shift, guys. It does change. Um, Depending on which party was which, it's always been really clear about who's represented by what party. Okay. And so that's what's happening down there. And um, Louisiana's second majority black district is really in danger. They're going to go away. And a lot of black people in Louisiana are about to lose their representation. And I wish people would just be honest about it and say they're fine with it instead of trying to pretend like, well, the law is the law. And, you know, they still have an opportunity to elect a representative that represents their interests. No, they don't. And the governor basically said as much. He knows what the score is. He just doesn't care because it's win at all costs. And I think we have this fake idea about elections and how people perceive fairness of elections. More times than not, um, the side that's in charge doesn't necessarily care about fairness. And the side that's been in charge more times than not has been GOP. Like it doesn't really like we pretend like people are inherently fair and they are not. People are inherently like what puts me at a strategic advantage. Hey, what's going on? How you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Shout out Joker. Shout out to everybody that's jumped in so far. I'm gonna be getting into more like fun comic book stuff, but I'm going through some of the bullshit politics of the day kind of thing. So bear with me, or if not, you know, holler at me a little bit later. But that's kind of what I'm powering through right now. Okay. And so race and party are intertwined, but we pretend like it's not because race is kind of a taboo topic for in a lot of circles. As soon as you start talking about racial stuff, people start getting hot under the collar and sweating and stuff, um, because it can lead to some emotional discomfort for specific people. Okay, a GOP gerrymandered in the Deep South functions as a white power map. They'll use the language party. That doesn't mean that every Republican in the district is white, because that's not what I'm saying. It means the party can become the legal mask for racial separation, like racial consequences. In racially polarized states, targeting Democrats will predictably weaken black voters just because of how voting alignments work. And I feel like there's this weird bullshit game where we're pretending like it ain't that's not what it is. And I don't have a lot of respect for people that are running down that line. Okay. So partisan gerrymander, which is legal according to the Supreme Court, um, it can easily become a racial vote dilution with better branding. That's what happens. So it ends up being like we're just playing with words, like we're doing the semantics game. And I think that's one of the problems that I have when we start talking about, Supreme Court rulings and everything. A lot of it boils down to semantics, and it's not necessarily about justice. It's about how you're asking the question, how the briefings are organized. So I tell people, when you go to court, it's not necessarily about what's true or not true. It's about what you can prove. And a lot of times what you can prove or not prove, or what you can convince people is more probable, is really based on how you put your words together. I learned that, even standing in court with I didn't have any law school or anything, but I'm sitting there with clients that I was working with and was able to push back against, some of the state lawyers and things along those lines, just because I understood a couple of different things about what I knew. And that I would demand that, for my families that, and I'll tell my families too, if you're sitting in court and they start running down all that Latin and all those other legal words that you don't understand, you have the ability, you have the right to raise your hand and ask that they put it in layman's terms so that you can understand what's being said. Because I knew the game. I learned the game pretty quick. It's not in court, it's not about what's true or accurate. It's about what you can convince people of. And I think a lot of people have kind of an immature concept of how courts actually work in this country. It's never about the truth. literally had a defense attorney tell me that, if there's a case of like a kid gets molested by an adult, um, if they're really locked in or getting that adult off of those charges, they will absolutely put a 5-year-old on the stand and cross-examine them if the prosecution allows them to. So again, it's not about what's true. It's about what you can convince people of in the court system. And so that's the game that's getting played at the highest level at the Supreme Court. We're playing words. We're playing games with words. We're playing. Yeah, we're playing. Yeah, it's a word game. Well, we can't draw this along racial lines, but we can draw it along party lines, which oftentimes still is racial lines. See how that works. All right. So let's talk about the myth of meritocracy. And I'll give you a narrow example that I have from my working experience in my old life, um, moving up the ladder in youth residential care. I had a couple of job interviews before I actually landed at one that was an actual promotion. And in one of the job interviews, I was literally told I'm the most qualified person for this position. No question about it. I was the guy they wanted to go with. But it came down from on top that Mr. Guy over here, and I'll be honest with Mr. White dude over here, who had a couple of had some incidences of sexual harassment with staff, that were his direct reports, and had some other issues that got him put on essentially detention for a little bit. It was his time. I was the most qualified, but this person over here, they needed to move him into the position. And so he got the position. It didn't go to the most qualified person. It went to the person they wanted it to go to. And it was maddening because I'm sitting there like, what more can I do than be the best? What more can I do than be the best option? If we're not even going to be fair about how this job is rewarded. And it was more infuriating than to hear it from people that were around that process. And even, it was just infuriating to hear it from people around the process and people that knew and saying that's who they wanted you, but it was such and such his time to move up. They needed to move him from where he was back to the position that he had already abused and been accused or been found liable for sexually harassing one of the staff members. But I was more qualified. I was told I was the best candidate, but it didn't matter. And so it's infuriating when somebody sits there and talks to me about meritocracy, because I don't think that that's how that works. I've experienced it where you're the best candidate, you outperform everybody. People will tell you you're the perfect candidate for the job, but they get overruled because Mr. Man over here, I know that he got in trouble for being nasty, being sexually inappropriate with one of the staff members, but the people up there said it's his time. Doesn't matter. You get to go back down the ladder. All that effort that you put in preparing for this, and aligning yourself with your goal, all that stuff doesn't matter. That's where the entire meritocracy thing fell apart for me. Quite literally, it evaporated on that day, where I realized it doesn't matter if you're the best at what you do, as long as somebody else. Hey, how's it going? Thanks for tuning in. I'm doing pretty well. Doing pretty well. And so I realized that position, it's like I can outperform people. I can come in and work at the level of expertise that they can't match. But at the end of the day, if the person who's making the decisions, they're not looking for the best person for the job, they're looking for the person that needs to be moved. It didn't matter. None of that mattered. And so essentially it's like, so being the best doesn't matter. Why am I working so hard? Why am I killing myself doing this? And so meritocracy sounds fair until you ask who gets to define the merit, because I think that's the dagger under the cape. Who gets to define what is the merit? What merits are we using? Because in that case, the merits were, well, we got, we already have a couple of black people up here in this position. We got a white male that's been in the position before, but he got in trouble for being inappropriate with staff. And so we had to move him somewhere else. And then we have a young black guy who's coming in who's actually everything we're looking for. And I wouldn't be telling you this if I didn't know this. Like, I'm not making this stuff up. And they went with the guy that had the spotty record who probably should have been fired. What signal does that send to me? We'll try again. Keep working hard to earn a position that is 100% based on the proclivities of somebody that's not even necessarily directly in the hiring process. Is coming down from up top. And so one of the things is a major resume study found that applicants with white sounding names needed about 10 resumes to get one callback. Now this is an older study because recessions tend to change how resume processes do. But applicants with black sounding names needed about 15. There's a reason why a lot of black parents my age really struggled with what they're going to name us. They didn't want to have our names sound too ethnic because there was always a concern about whether we would be able to get a job. It's a lot easier to hire a Brian than it is to hire Malik, which would have been the name my mom was considering. Like I was going to be Malik, I was going to be Brian, and she decided to go with Brian because in her mind and her lived experience, Maliks don't get hired. And that's what she was really concerned with. And we have a lot of people that are still operating off of those same frameworks in the hiring and the decision-making process. We have to understand that oftentimes when you don't clearly define what the merits are, and let's just keep it 100%. In this country, a lot of times for a lot of people, being white is a merit. And it's not just white folks who believe that. It's not just white folks who believe that being white is a merit. That's not just exclusive to white folks. That's where the entire respectability politics thing comes down. But even when you start getting into different racial ethnic groups who have some kind of proximity to colonialism, oftentimes internally, especially if you have a group that's been oppressed, oftentimes they will start seeing that oppressor as the desired status to be in the society to attain the power that they want. And so they will make themselves align with the people they perceive have the power. And so it plays out like this. It plays out like colorism in groups, where the closer you look to that white ideal, the more status you have, or the more perceived status you have with some people. Like I said, being closer or white adjacent is a merit in a lot of places. And it's not just white people that see it that way. Okay. And having a name that sounds too black or too ethnic is a fast way. Like if they can't pronounce your name, your application may get in the bin before you even get a chance to step in the room to interview. And that's just how it works. It's just how it works. I've seen hiring managers literally talk about that. I've seen hiring managers make fun of somebody's name and say, yeah, I'm not going to interview them. I can't even pronounce their name. I've seen it. I've experienced it. Been in the room with other hiring managers who thought like that. Oh, I got a comment. I do not understand what billionaires think the final outcome of all this is. If nobody has a living wage, they cannot buy your products, they cannot buy your services or rent properties being owned and hoarded. At what point does the whole thing not just collapse? All right, so I did a show about this. And it's really weird, but when millionaires have these conferences where they all get together, like when these tech billionaires have these conferences, when this is a good question. I'm gonna get to this. This is a good question. I want to get to this, but let me finish this one first. So please, please, please stick around. I've seen where billionaires have these conferences, and you think these tech billionaires will be getting together talking about how they're going to pool their resources to save the world and blah, 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 blah. And more times than not, it's them talking about their doomsday bunkers. And when society finally collapses, how they're going to use their money and resources to get our loyalty and make us work for them. It's a crazy way to think. And I don't know how much they've thought it through, because I mean, down all the way down to, and I've heard it, seen it on, I've seen it on TikTok, I've seen it on Instagram, I've seen it on YouTube, but I've seen it in other places too, where one of them had the idea that they had some Delta Force military person that they were going to pay money to, that when the apocalypse came, they were going to fly to their bunker and protect them from all the other people that they led into the bunker. And I'm sitting there like, so the apocalypse is on, right? The electrical grid is shut down. There is no bank to get money from. You're all trapped in this bunker, and the alpha, I hate to say alpha, but the toughest person in the room is your security guard. How long are you going to stay in charge? Because if you talk to military, like special forces operators and things like that, Navy SEALs, all that other stuff, these are not the most moral or scrupulous people on the planet. And so how long are you going to maintain control over said special forces guy before they usurp your power and now you're working for them in your own bunker? Because the money doesn't mean anything. So I don't know. I think the billionaires are thinking about how they're going to survive the apocalypse, but they're not thinking about what the hierarchies are going to look like once we get there. That's just my take. I don't think they thought that far ahead. How much of Black liberal is? I think a good chunk of Black liberation is actually stymied by a lot of the precepts of capitalism. Like, I think there's a layer to me, and this is just me positing on stuff, but there's a layer of communal, extended families, non-biological families. There is a layer of tribalism that still permeates Black community, and capitalism is kind of that pursuit of that hyper individualized thing. I don't think we're tied. I don't think we're going to buy ourselves out of the oppression. I don't think it's going to happen. And I know that there's all this Black buying power stuff, all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, the people that control the means, at the end of the day, you could have the Blackest owned business and do business with other Black people. But at the end of the day, in the supply chain, somewhere along the line, you're going to have to transact business with white people. And that's just the game. And so I don't think capitalism is part of the blueprint of Black liberation. I think that, and I'm not saying we don't have to do business with each other. I think it's going to be more cooperative economics. When you already have everything, you don't really need to sell anything to anyone anymore, do you? Yeah, well, and that's the thing. So I think what happens is, and if this was tied back, if this is talking about the billionaire and the bunker and everything, or I mean, I don't know. I don't think that I honestly do not see an alignment with capitalism, just because of the nature of how it is, where it's not necessarily sustainable. You have to feed it. It's not a self-sustainable system. It has to constantly be fed. I don't know. I don't think that Black liberation is tied to capitalism. That's just my take. I know that there are other people that are a lot more learned in the economic realm that may have other opinions, but that's just my take. I feel like they point to successful Black people, like, see, they made it so oppression doesn't exist anymore. At least that's how Obama was sold to us. Yeah, I think also because one of the things that's interesting about Obama was my mom was really into Obama, but it took her a long time um, to believe in get on the Obama train, you know, because a lot of black people, and it took black people a long time to warm up to Obama, just because there was this idea that a black person was never, ever, ever going to sit in that seat. And I do think that there is an element of black gatekeeping that does happen, where there are specific black folks that are, and I don't believe that this like strategic, like there's some secret cult that is saying, "Hey, black person, you are ordained. We've chosen you to sit at the top of whatever." Okay, I think that you have black people that have made it to the top of their industry, um, and there's always a limit on how many there are going to allow at the top of that. But I do think that they will point to a successful black person and say, "Hey, this person made." They'll point to an Oprah and say, "Oprah made it. Why can't you make it? Why can't you do the thing that Oprah did?" Not understanding that Oprah is one person amongst, was it like 30 million? Obama's kind of the same thing. I think that's kind of, Obama is kind of used as this bulwark, this symbol of black success. And yeah, he does represent one aspect of black political uh, success, reaching the highest office in the land. But that doesn't mean that all the other problems go away. And that doesn't mean that he wasn't limited by those other problems. Man, listen, when Obama was in office, where I worked, I saw some of the craziest, most racist things and weird death threats and all kinds of other stuff that would just happen to land in my inbox for about Obama accidentally. Like people sharing super racist memes and all this other stuff. So I don't buy into the idea that this successful black person somehow invalidates the existence of all these oppressive systems. I think what we saw was a perfect alignment of factors going into Obama's election. I think there was a general fatigue with GOP ran governments. Um, we were coming out, we were locked into a war that seemed to have no end. We had experienced literally one of the worst financial catastrophes ever recorded. And the bottom had fallen on the market. People were losing their jobs. Everything was going sideways really, really fast. And I think people had their saturation point and were completely fed up with the people that had been in power for the last, was it 8 years? Yeah, Bush. Yeah, 8 years. Because before Bush 2, it was Clinton. I think people got sick of it. And I think Obama, because they ran on the hope and change thing, they sold that as he could be different. When you look at Obama's politics, you know, he's center right-ish. But the way that they spun it was, and the way that a lot of people on the other side of the aisle thought it was, they were talking about him like he was like he was Bernie or something, like he was the super leftist of the leftists, and that's not what it was. They could project all of these fears onto him. I think Obama even upheld a lot of it and made it easier for Trump. The ICE leader was the ICE leader under Obama. Um, I think sometimes, and it's not even in defense of Obama. Sometimes, especially when you have employees, when you have people that work for you, when you manage people, they're gonna do what you allow them to do. They're gonna work in, and so I think when Trump came in, and saw Obama's ICE, was it Holman or whatever? Um, when he saw Holman, he's like, "All right, you go do whatever you want to do." And that dude was like, "Bet, I'ma just run with it." I'm reminded of, if you ever seen the movie Boomerang with if you ever seen the movie Boomerang with the entire Strong J commercial, where Eddie Murphy was in this weird depressive state because he had screwed things up so bad um, with Halle Berry, that he basically comes in and lets the creative director run wild. And that dude was a certified freak. Like he was on some weird freaky stuff. And he almost got fired behind what this dude did. When he was able to put constraints around dude, um, and operate in a managerial function and say, yeah, you can't do X, Y, and Z. Um, you know, just he got success with it. But when he let this dude just off the chain, Dude did and almost got his ass fired on that movie. I remember that. There's a lot of black men now who are right wing. And I think what we're seeing is a growth of the contrarianism. I think we're seeing people where they weren't necessarily 100% politically engaged before. I know a lot of brothers that weren't necessarily 100% politically engaged before, and they are looking at the sum total of their life and how the government's kind of screwed them over, and looking at the political party where most black people are aligned with and saying they haven't produced results, and instantly, if they're not producing results, I need to pivot and go to the other side, as opposed to saying, wait a minute, maybe this whole thing is fucked up, and maybe we need to take a pump the brakes here, without throwing in my lot to the other side. I look at it like a Kanye West. When I look at it was I think it was Van Lathan when he was over at TMZ and he challenged Kanye West, uh, about his slavery was a choice comment. And you saw how quickly Kanye West retreated off of that point because he hadn't really thought about it. It was just some shit that he said. He hadn't thought about the import of what he was actually saying, and he hadn't thought about the history and all that other stuff. Um, I think a lot of brothers who end up falling into that right wing, they don't. Some of them, that's really who they are. But others, I do think that it hasn't really been thought about. It's just let me do the opposite of what has screwed us over in the past, or what I perceive to be the origin of our problems. Yeah, yeah, that's what they did. That's what Eddie Murphy did. Is, hey, just pop off, man. I think that's what Trump did with Holman. Hey, man, just go do you. And Holman's like, all right, well, Gestapo it up, bro. Let's go. Let's roll this out here. Let's go ahead, and let's go act like stormtroopers and let's go. I mean, realistically, that's what they wanted in the first place. They wanted a shock and awe campaign. They're trying to send a message, and I don't think people quite understand what happened with the deployment ice. Let me get to this next one. You can't fix the system from the inside because they already thought of everything, right? And the system has a corrosive influence. Um, it has an influence on you where the system is going to be the system regardless. And so the only option is to build your own system independently and get it viable so that people see it as a viable option. That's why I look at that railroad thing where you see, one person on the track versus 100 people on the track, and you have to pull the switch and decide where the train goes. Um, there's no way out of that situation unless you build another track, unless you put marshal the resources to build a third track that diverts away from all the people. And I think a lot of times people want that third option without necessarily doing the groundwork to build that third option. And so a lot of times that's what you run into in the progressive side of politics, where a lot of progressives want the answers. They want that third party candidate, but the third party candidate is just running for national office, and that's all they ever run for. They don't do any kind of groundwork to build any coalitions locally. They don't do any school board stuff, which is in city council stuff and things along those lines at a local level, county commissioner stuff, the stuff that actually moves the needle, improves people's lives. They don't want to build organically. They just want to leap the line and jump right up into the national stage politics. And that's not how things work. If you want to build a viable third party, you have to start from the ground up and build it up. Again, the way the political party, the trolley dilemma, yeah. The way the political party system is, hey, Maddie, how's it going? The way the political party system is really set up in this country, we are in, I think, the sixth or seventh political party system in the United States, where really the breakdown is you have progressives, conservatives, right? Like that's kind of how it really goes. And then the labels they shuffle around, where it's Democrat, Republican, and stuff like that. Those are not static. Those are just marketing terms, the way I perceive it. But we're in like the sixth or seventh iteration of it, and so the 2026 Republican or GOP is not the same thing as the 2000 GOP. Just not the same thing. They're not the same. They don't have the same policy stances, but we use the same name. There's a reason why the Whigs don't exist and the Democratic Republicans don't exist, right? The Silver Party doesn't exist anymore, because the political party system rotates every couple of election cycles and you get new people in. Initially, there was the Tea Party, and now we got MAGA. Tea Party don't exist no more. Yeah, that's what happened. I think that's what happened with AOC. Not to trying to defend everything she did, but she got in there and was like, "I'm going to change." Yeah, but you are when you're working in the constraints of a system like that, you have to compromise. You can't be uncompromising because what ends up happening when you are completely uncompromising, it turns into a Bernie situation where, yeah, Bernie has a lot of good ideas, but he can never get any legislation passed because he's so uncompromising. And at some point, it's like, what good does it do if you can never get any of your legislation passed because you're not willing to do any kind of yielding? And I understand wanting to stand 10 toes down on something, but in a system that is legislative, it you have to compromise on some level. And right now, we actually have a hijack of the legislative process. Yeah, Mitt Romney was Obama. And when we saw Mitt Romney, man, Mitt Romney, the way he was painted, like back in the days, Mitt Romney was a Republican, bro. And now, if he ran, he would be center. He'd be a center, kind of a centrist candidate, which is weird. That's why we lost, bro. He was just a white Obama. We lost for reasons. 33% is the biggest one. Even the GOP was purging out moderates. Right. And that's the thing. This country's lurched hard to the right. And I don't think people understand that. I don't think people necessarily talk about that. This country's lurched hard to the right. And I don't think like when I talk to people about growing up in the 80s and 90s, black people had an intense hatred of Reagan and what he represented. And now even Reagan would be to the left of where the Republican Party is, which is crazy. Reagan sold crack to black people. He literally said, "Hey, we're going to win the Cold War by selling drugs and selling crack to black people." Like that's what that he decided that we were a reasonable sacrifice, so he could win the Cold War. But he would still be to the left of what we have right now, which is insanity. Yeah, they are moderates, and they're moderates in the sense of they're moderate comparatively to what the fringe is, but we're getting closer to the fringe. And I think on the left is a little bit more disorganized because how do I put this? I feel like the right wing is more in line with being in line and falling in line and walking the party line. I feel like the left is more in line with the moral argument of performing correct politics. And I don't think necessarily either one of those is beneficial for what we actually need now. We need effective politics. Like we need effective politicians. Reagan would be a Democrat now. I don't know if I would go that far, but I think he would be considered a rhino. I think they'd consider him a Republican in name only. But I think his white nationalism and his racism would endear him to a lot of the current GOP. Yeah. And well, here's the thing. Here's the crazy part. So Reagan, he was one of the only like when he was governor of California, he wanted to disarm black people. And so he got the NRA. That was the only time the NRA was with removing gun rights from people. That was the only time they signed on it when Reagan wanted to disarm the Black Panthers. They're anti-gun at that point in time. So all of this stuff is malleable. It's all about who gains the advantage. Clinton was a demon. Yeah. Clinton was on his own thing, but it's almost like because Clinton was on some shit, bro. But I think Clinton, he had done that weird thing where he had courted these white Southerners who had typically gone the conservative route. Because I don't like to say the Democrat or Republican thing when we're talking about the Dixiecrats and things along those lines. Clinton managed to land them to a degree. I don't think any president, any Democratic candidate has carried white folks for, since I think for almost 60 or 70 years. but Clinton was about as close as they were going to get. And Clinton, and I think the thing you got to understand is this country hasn't seen a true hard, and I don't think they are. That's going to be taken seriously because the left doesn't necessarily have a coalition because there's so many moral arguments that the left will stand 10 toes down on that conservatives will absolutely acquiesce on as long as the party is going in the same general direction. They will compromise and they will sell out specific moral positions just so that they can get along and remain in power. Whereas the left, we will fight each other to the ground about specific moral issues. And I think that there is an element of pragmatism that does need to be introduced to the left because it goes back to this. And I know people don't like when I talk about this. Left want purity. That's the problem. One side treats it like a giant cult and we follow the cult, and the other side treats politics like American Idol, where they got to be our perfect candidate before we get behind them. They have to identically hold every single party position that we hold. They have to value exactly everything that we have. They speak to every single thing that we care about before we'll even consider voting for them. NRA is dead. Yeah. Wayne LaPierre saw to that. He embezzled almost them out of existence. They got turned into a Russian front, which was easy because of the money problems they were in. Liberals like you hear them say, I will forgive 70% of the country. It's like, how are we ever going to win the election? And I think that's one of the problems. One of the strategic blunders of the Biden administration was not punishing by doing this laissez-faire. We're better, they go low, we go high kind of governance, where there was no consequences for the fascist shenanigans that happened under the first Trump presidency. They just kind of let it go. There was no prosecution that really, they slow-walked everything. There was no internal pressure on the DOJ to move expeditiously with charges because there was this assumption that the first Trump presidency was so crazy that we would never have another one. I think they gambled, they hedged on that one, and they lost. And because of that, a lot of people that should have been punished for the different things that they did got away with it. I mean, Nixon had to resign his post for much less than the shit that we saw during the 2016 to 2020 thing. Biden absolutely fucked up by trying to do the we're going to be the better people. And I think that is the liberal dilemma, is this obsession with being the better person. I think it was this obsession with, I'm going to be the bigger and better person. We have to look better than this person over here. And that is a death kiss. Yeah. Nixon was guilty of so much worse, but I don't know, because I'm not necessarily convinced that Trump wasn't in with the mob. Hearing some of the people I know from that grew up in New York in the 80s and stuff, and listening to how he moved around town and how he always had an unlimited supply of money, and how a lot of people that did actually get litigious with him ended up dead. I don't know. Like, I think he was on some mob shit. I always feel like he was tied into some other criminal enterprise. And so, but again, we had this obsession with being the bigger person as opposed to actually using the justice system the way it's been used on regular and poor people for decades. The next administration will have to punish Trump, or there will be no country anymore. The problem is they went after Stormy Daniels' case when that was the weakest case they had. Right. Like that. And we were here's the thing. And this is something I got to throw out here. And then I'm going to jump back into where I was going. I think that there's a misunderstanding of how power actually works in this country. And I think that the social contract is gone. I was saying this after the 2020 election, but specifically during 2024 after that, there is no social contract anymore. It doesn't exist. And legal courts and all this other stuff, that's only hard power for people without means. I'm gonna say that again. The legal system is only hard power for people that don't have the means. If you're rich enough, the legal system is soft power. And you can get to a point where you have enough power amassed. You have enough power amassed where no court will ever check you. Look how they're moving right now. The courts will say, "Hey, don't do that," and they're like, "Yeah, fuck you. I'm doing it. I don't care." Like they don't care. They know there's no consequence. And I think that we have a misunderstanding of hard versus soft power right now. Right now, the hard power is what I can blow you up or arrest you and put you in prison. But once you reach a certain status, like once you reach a certain even social economic status, it doesn't matter anymore. I think if they ever did a real investigation on Elon, they'd find all kinds of shit that he was into. But he has so much money, it don't matter. Yeah, the joke in DC is Nixon got busted for the least of crime. I believe that, but I also think that we have not seen the Trump iceberg all the way. Yeah, I think Trump was tied to the mob because people were ending up dead. Like there people in his orbit would end up disappeared or dead. If they look like they were getting a little bit too eager. There's a lot of settlements paid out and stuff like that, but yeah, people end up dead around him. Well, I think when I say mobbed up, I think he was tied to the mob, but I also think he's a Russian asset. And Russia is basically a criminal enterprise at this point. They're basically run by their own little Russian mob or whatnot, but they're oil, they're the criminal enterprise that has a lot of oil and stuff. And so I think that there's a lot of other shadow play going on underneath what's going on. I think we're at the tip of the Trump iceberg, to be honest with you. Nixon was trying to like he was collecting intel on like the thing he got in trouble for was the break-in at the Watergate Hotel trying to build his enemies list out. Trump is actually executing on his enemies list. Like he's actually yeah, it's how many mob I think he's tied into the mob, and now we're tied into the Russian mobs. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit behind, guys. I'm trying to catch up to the comments. There's at least 3 mafia groups. I forgot what the young lady's name is, but she actually wrote a book about it. And she dropped this book years and years ago while Trump during the first Trump presidency, where she is an expert in Russian politics, and she had done an investigative journalist. She had done all the footwork on it. If I can find the book, I'll post it here. Trump Russian book. It's called Kleptocracy, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to. I gotta look at it. I think her name was Sarah, something or the other line. But anyway, if I can find the book, I will absolutely post it. But essentially, she had done a lot of the groundwork. She was kind of an expert in Russian politics or whatnot, and she written an entire book that made all the connections about how much he was tied into that. No more trust in our justice. It's about maintaining order, right? Was it Kikostocracy? I think that's the Kikiostocracy, where it's ruled by the most inept and corrupt. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. Italian, Russian, Israeli. I don't doubt that at all. Yeah, well, son-in-law and his son-in-law Kushner. I mean, Kushner's dad did jail time, and he had a lot of Israeli connections. Russian mafia is heavy into human trafficking. Dang, I feel like I'm way behind. I know Kushner's dad is tied into the Israeli mafia. He's also tied to Israeli intelligence too. Oh shoot, sorry. It's the comments as they're coming through because I'm trying to show people. Sorry. If you don't want me to, I'll just read the comments and let them and not put them on the screen if that's what you prefer. But yeah, I gotta find the book because I think the book is called Kleptocracy. And I believe her name is Sarah. What is her name? Kleptocracy book. Yep. State is it Thieves of State? No, that's not it. I think it's Kleptocracy. Anyway, I'll find it. And I'd see her face all the time. She used to be on CNN all the time. She was actually an expert in Russian, and she had talked about the Russian mob ties a long, long time ago. Oops. Yeah, Thieves of State. That's what it was. That's one of the books, but I believe there was one called Kleptocracy. Like I remember reading the ebook. And now I can't find it. Like I cannot find it. Russian Trump connection. Ooh, I can't spell. Okay, there's been a lot of books written about it. Yo, there's been a lot of books written about this. Matter of fact, she used to even have a podcast where she would talk about this stuff, bro. Anyway, and I think she ended up having like, because as with anybody, when you are against MAGA, you're gonna get death threats. I got death threats for being anti-MAGA, bro. Like I shut down the entire comic book website behind it. What do you think about electoralism on a local level, like Zoran Mandani, etc.? We need grassroots movements. I think that grassroots movements are needed. I also think that on the left, we have to like leftists need to dial back their ambitions a little bit and stop trying to go for national office before you control the school board. This is how you build a coalition. You got to be viable and show that you could win elections and build up to actually be a viable option to upset the existing parties. But what's happening is you're finding a lot of leftists jumping in and trying to play the same games, play the same game as the major two parties, and getting frustrated when they get rejected by the major two parties. It's like it's not going to work. You can't ransom the parties. The only thing you can do is create a viable alternative, a legitimate viable alternative, not the bullshit that we got right now. Because some of these people that they're putting up there are not serious people. They're not serious candidates. And I'll be real with you. One of the most consistently pragmatic voting blocks in this country are black folks. Like they are very pragmatic in terms of we sit down and look at who has opportunity to win. And oftentimes that's the decision that we make. We make a calculated decision on who we think has opportunity to win. And you're not going to sit there and bully the party into this third party candidate. You got to make the third party something that people actually believe in by winning the local game. And I don't think that that's happened enough. I think we're trying to skip steps. And see, I need to familiarize myself a little bit more. I know Mamdani and I followed part of it, but I need to familiarize. I don't know enough about the grassroots campaign that he did to speak intelligently on it. And I've learned a while ago that I do more harm than good when and I've learned this. I was journalist. That was what I went to school for, was journalism. I learned a long time ago that sometimes the most informed thing you can do is say, I don't know enough about that. And so I don't know enough about Mamdani's campaign to speak intelligently about it. So I'll defer, and you can kind of tell me what it is, and then I can go back and look. The Democrat Party is destroying themselves, so we don't need to run for president. Yeah, I think what's happening is, and I don't necessarily believe that the Democrats are 100% corrupt near the top. I think you have people that are trying to fight the good fight in a rigged system, and that's not conducive. You're not going to do that. They're trying to fight the good fight. They're trying to win the moral argument and look like present and have the presentation of better politics. And I don't know if that's necessarily an effective way to govern the society, because I think collectively America's brain got microwaved somewhere along the line, and uh, they're not they're not appealing to the microwaved brain of America right now. I know that's very dim, but I think collectively that's kind of where I went door to door and helped everyone. You go to people and ask them what their issues are and act upon them. There's no such thing as right wing labor. Here's the thing. Um, I do believe strongly that a organizing force is still racism. I think that that's a very effective force. And so for a lot of people, when you start getting into the red states, um, they're not necessarily like, even though their vote is materially not in their interest or against their interest, it's still in their interest, if that makes sense. They may not get anything materially out of it, but they're still voting in their interest. And I think um not wanting black and brown people to have things is an organizing force in a lot of pockets. I'm in a blue dot in a red state, and I've seen the cut off my nose to spite this person over here kind of mentality. And I know that we think that we can appeal. I think there's an assumption that you can appeal to somebody that is so ingrained in their dislike of that other that you could appeal to their better nature. There is no better nature to appeal to. And that's what's scary about it. No, it's because the right and the federal government has been actively kneecapping left-wing activists and scary leaders for at least 100 years. That is true. Um, and that they've done a lot of um limiting a lot of controlling the opposition, whether they're women, minorities, labor leaders, academics, civil rights leaders. Yeah, and researchers. I got to pop the most leftists can't comprehend that no outright rings and racists. They're just dumb and need to be pointed at the real enemy. But I think that there's a strong segment of right wingers that have been so propagandized that for them the real enemy is this ambiguous minority, because their entire lives they've been told that this person is taking things out of their pocket, and there is no saving. There's no there's no there is no negotiating with that level. It's talking to a person who is in a cult, who's deeply in the thralls of the cult leader. At some point you got to cut your losses and focus on, okay, so how do we prevent this person from hijacking the rest of society? Because they may not be racist, but a lot of right wingers are actually, a lot of the people that are on the right wing are aligned with racist policies in some way. They may not be overtly racist themselves, but they have an allegiance to policies that are inherently racist that do maximum harm to people. All right, let's see. The passing down intergenerational. I feel like I skipped a couple things. Each generation has to restart each time. Yes, that is true. And unlearn the lessons. I think what's happening is, um, so I'm a comic book nerd, right? I think we live in the reality where Doctor Doom won. Except it's not the awesome reality that when Doctor Doom actually won in One World Under Doom that just happened a couple months ago. When Doctor Doom won in One World Under Doom, we had compulsory education all the way up to PhD level available to every man, woman, and child on the planet. Universal health care, income guarantee, a lot of things that were really, really awesome, like really amazing, to the point where you're sitting there reading the book like, well, damn, I wouldn't mind living in a Doctor Doom America. It's pretty awesome. I think we're in that state where the bad guys won. And I think the bad guys won a long, long time ago. I think the bad guys won. Um, I'll be honest with you. I think the bricks for the modern right wing movement was set in place during the second Bush years. And I know that we had Obama in the interim, and I know we had Biden in the interim, but I think that the bad guys won around that point in time. And now we're all just trying to survive it. And I don't know what the redemption arc for this country is. Because if the country is so openly, I remember getting into it with a friend of mine online, because I didn't even know that they were right wing like that. But they watched that entire debate between him and Kamala Harris, and the dude got up there and said they're eating the cats and the dogs. And the friend basically said, "Oh man, yeah, I mean, I think Trump won it." And my thing was like, that man said that they're eating cats and dogs, man. In a normal country, that level of lying would exclude you from public office in a serious country. But we reached that point, and I almost realized at that point that the election was lost. It wasn't any due to anything about the debate performance, but it was the fact that he could float something so outrageous out there, and people were like, it wasn't that big of a deal. We were cooked at that time, bro. Like, we're cooked. All right, let me catch up here. Um, let's see. It's so easy to look at others and be like, you're the source of my problems. Yeah. I feel like um I feel like there's a backlash. I do feel like this is the backlash against the black president backlash. Even though Obama was not a left-leaning president by any means, way, shape, or form, him being in office broke a lot of people's brains. Because when I was talking to people, they couldn't even articulate why they didn't like him, why they hated him so much. They couldn't even articulate a reason why they didn't like him. I think that it cooked people's brains because he was not supposed, the black person was not supposed to be in the presidency. They would have taken anybody but him, anybody. And I think that it actually broke people's brains. And I think we're seeing the backlash of that. You know, was it, they call it palogenic ultranationalism, right? Where we have to go through a rebirth process where people feel like America has to go through a rebirth and purification rite, some kind of sacrament to get to back to where it's reclaim its former glory, the glorious year of 2009 when America's entire economy almost collapsed overnight. Those magical times. Um, I don't think it's necessary. I think that it drove some people nuts, and I don't understand it because at best he was innocuous. Okay, so with Epstein files, and this is a cynical take because this is my old wheelhouse is working with abusive and neglected kids. I think what the Epstein files showed was a lot of people are perfectly fine with feeding children to monsters in order to gain whatever political advantage that they want. I think because I've actually read a lot of parts of the Epstein files and never got on television, and I think they took advantage of the fact that most people don't know how to read legal briefs and they can't really vet sources, and so they don't know the difference between a primary source, secondary source, tertiary source, or anything along those lines. They don't know how these different things, and so it was putting a lot together. That's why they dumped the whole Epstein files on the internet at the same time because they knew most people weren't, and it's not illiterate, but being literate of legalese to the degree where they could parse what's being said. Um, I think that I think the, I in a weird way, they ended up winning the Epstein argument just by dropping uh what felt like most of the files, which is not even close to most of the files, um, and trying to desensitize people to it. And again, I think that there's a lot of people that are perfectly fine with feeding children to monsters. Gas is $4. People are still making excuses for it. It's crazy. Didn't help that Biden was completely gone for half his presidency. I think Biden was just old. I don't think he was cognitively like not there, but I mean, at some point you just get old. But then if that's the argument and Obama's gone, Trump sundowns at least once a day. Have you ever okay, so I'll ask you this. Have you ever read any like a Trump speech, like without the voiceover or anything? Just read it. It's like staring into the mouth of madness. It makes no sense whatsoever. He's not connecting thoughts or ideas together. It's just random, off the cuff, off the head bullshit. And Trump has been a sundowning dementia patient for a long, long time. I just think the difference between what happened with him, like at the debate when he debated Joe Biden that first time, I think the difference was his version of sundowning is words falling out of his mouth in things that seem to be sentences. And so people are more forgiving of that than somebody who has a stammer, who has to search for their words. I do think that they didn't necessarily do Biden any favors by all the other stuff that they had him going through, and then put him up on stage half tired, half cold, coming off a cold and old as hell with his stammer and stuff. I think he was kind of set up to fail in that regard. But I think the reason why people aren't on Trump's dementia is because it comes out in words, and it's just sheets of words that don't mean anything. They hated Hillary more. I think so. I think the Hillary didn't do herself any favors because I wasn't a Hillary fan either. But for some reason, the Obama just was the straw that broke the camel's back. It broke people's brains, man. Trump, COVID, and Obama broke people's brains 3 times. Yes, COVID actually did a number on a lot of people. A lot of people forgot. Like when we talk about inflation during Obama's presidency, well, inflation, look at the inflation. The economy stopped for almost 24 months. If inflation is a lagging indicator of a problem inside the economy, the entire economy, the global economy stopped for 24 months almost. And you think that there wasn't going to be some kind of recession coming down the line? We were in a mode where there was financial triage going on during that first COVID lockdown. I hate to say COVID lockdown, during the first COVID round of COVID, they were doing economic triage because money stopped flowing through the economy. And it's almost like when you stop blood flowing through a heart. And they were just dumping money. They turned on the money printers, were just dumping money into the economy, trying to keep the heart beating. And people are like, hey, man, inflation, Biden inflation. Like, I knew that inflation was going to happen when the economy stopped. It functionally stopped. The COVID thing was such a bizarre thing. Everything, the whole world shut down functionally. There was no way we were going to come out of there without inflation or a recession. The fact that we emerged from it, it was absolutely blind, stupid luck. I've been right since 1997. There are people across the right and even left who think Hillary is the worst lotus ever. Yeah, I think there was a lot of ball clutching with Hillary when she was the first lady. She threatened a lot of really insecure dudes who had small penises. Like, I'll be honest with you, like she brought that BDE and they didn't have it, and they ended up, and that started her villain arc in the right wing. If you were alive watching, like listening to like talk radio, there was a lot of really, really little penis energy happening on talk radio surrounding Hillary when she was first lady. It was weird. And I think that was where the villain arc started. But she didn't do herself any favors with all the super predator stuff and all the other shit that she was running down. Maddie, let me know. Okay, Maddie, real quick before I click on it, let me know if you don't want me to put your comments on screen. Because I can read them but not put your comments on screen. Just let me know, okay? Ooh, guys, slow down. I'm trying to catch up. There are people right now who think Hillary's the worst FLOTUS ever. Okay, I want that one. And then I go Melania, and the left wingers go look a little too sheepish. Right. Melania, like the most disinterested. She don't even want to be there. You could tell the first time he won, she was like, damn, I thought he was going to lose and we're just going to use this to make money. I don't want to be doing this for the next 4 years. I mean, she got her side piece out of it, that Secret Service dude that she ended up being in that long-term relationship with. She got a side piece out of it, but she's like, you can see it on her face, like, damn, I don't want to be doing this for the next 4 years. I think Trump was shocked that he won that first time. All right. It's like flooding the zone. Yeah, that's what it is. Sorry, I'm catching up here. What, you talking about Biden? Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Biden fan, bro, but I mean, dude was just old. And he had a stammer, bro. Like, I mean, you get old with a speech impediment and you half there anyway. But I mean, if we're gonna say Biden was clocked out and demented through his presidency, what is Trump, bro? Like, this dude is literally just doing sheets of words every single time he gets on the mic. He don't know what he be saying up there, bro. It's the most insane, just gibberish. It's not even well organized gibberish. It's just pure gibberish dumping out of this dude's skull. Biden administration was like, nothing's happening. Stocks have never been higher. I think Biden's administration's fatal flaw was, we're going to put all this behind us. We're not going to even talk about what happened the last 4 years. And that is like, that's the church response to an abuse allegation. That don't fix shit. It doesn't restore, it doesn't repair anybody. And I think that's kind of what happened. Capitalism itself ends in recessions. Yes, it's a function. It's a function. You notice that we have a recession. I was doing the time tape. I was looking at, I've lived as an adult, I've lived through 6 recessions. Every single time the economy starts picking back up, another recession hits and absolutely craters the job market. I've done this 6 times. And people wonder why I'm cynical about stuff. I know. Okay, so I don't necessarily. I think that there was okay. I'll give credit where credit is due, because you're right actually about that. He worked hard to limit the inflation problems, but at the end of the day, it's like trying to hold back a dam that's about to break. And I think they did an admirable job, but there was an element of luck that played into it too, where people were just gonna determine to try. You had the element of people that were determined to go out there and make everybody sick and live life normally. And I think that was another element of it. Here's the thing, and this is maybe this goes to the crux of it, Maddie. Let me know. I think it goes to the crux of this. And I don't think the left, I don't think political left. Me and my daughter are actually having this conversation when I picked her up from school. I don't think that the left fully understands the concept of harm reduction. Sometimes I don't think the left fully grasps the concept of bad versus objectively worse, because I see it all as this incrementalism based policy, and they don't have any use for it. They want radical, they want the change to happen right now. And so when you look at scenarios where let's try to reduce the harm this is actually causing. They don't get excited about that. Now it's easy not to get excited about harm reduction because harm is still happening. You're just trying to reduce the amount of harm that's happening. I think there's a part of, specifically economically, a part of the Biden administration that was really locked into the harm reduction. And we know a recession is coming, and we know inflation is about to be insane because the quantitative easing at the Fed, where they absolutely turned on the money printers and let them run. And a lot of it was running up the score because I remember very clearly we were in the middle of like the pandemic had really started and everything is shut down, and the stock market is soaring, and you're seeing things in the stock market that had never happened before. Indicators that had historically been accurate for years and years suddenly didn't mean shit. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that they left the money printers on for way too long, and a lot of people went from millionaires to billionaires just because of how they let those money machines run on. And I think it wasn't totally built to enrich people. And that didn't happen during a Biden. That happened during Trump. But I think the Fed policy absolutely created the environment that we were in. And it wasn't necessarily helped by Trump's economic policy, which was none during the pandemic, except dump more money into the problem. If Biden if he was 5 or 10 years younger, he'd have wrecked Trump. He was Obama's attack dog and kneecapper. He's also being Trump's heady. Yeah, I do believe that. But I also do think that there was trying to be. I think, and this is the one thing I don't agree with Michelle Obama on. This entire they go low, we go high. Listen, you got to play. You have to have somebody that's willing to play in the dirt too. That's why also you need somebody that's going to play in the dirt, and I think Biden was that for a while. I think they caught him on a terrible night, and I think you had two guys that were rambling at each other. I think that on a normal occasion, Biden was more coherent than Trump, but Trump is just louder. And I think the society that we live in is attuned to loud and volume over correctness. Don't forget, real economic doesn't correlate to the financial economy that Americans actually have stock. Yep. Sorry if I'm behind. Yeah, okay. And that's insane. That is insane. And I think what happened in 2024 was I think America lost its sense of proportion because we had so many catastrophes going on. Yeah, we ended up losing our sense of proportion about things. The Gaza thing fried people's brain to a degree where they're calling her, they're like, oh, whatever. They're attributing all these things to Harris as a vice president, where that is literally not her station. Like, she has no control over the military as vice president. All she can do is she's in the position where she still has the job and she's still going for the job. So there's a line that she had to toe. And like I said, I don't think there's a part in this. Please don't kill me for this. Please don't kill me for this, y'all. There's a wing of leftist politics that they have no need for politics to the degree that they don't necessarily understand the interplay of how politics actually works. They don't take the time to learn how these things actually work, how these systems of government interface with one another, and how to play the political game, because they don't have any need for it. In their real life, they're straight shooters and everything, and they don't necessarily have any need for it. And so they don't have much tolerance of people that are still playing the political game. But unfortunately, if you're going to be in politics, you got to play the political game. And so I think a lot of it comes from not understanding that there's never going to be, or I'm not going to say never, but there's never going to be like a far left politician that gains the presidency, because you still have to, on a level, appeal to some moderate things. And I don't think that's going to happen. And so, unfortunately, we talk in extremes, and a lot of the language around Harris was really, really extreme based on really specious information. And I do think there was a little bit of a psyop that happened with it too. A little bit of a not a little bit of a pretty good disinformation campaign that was hastened by Elon and all them. So that's my take on it. GDP is nominal. It doesn't really mean anything. Well, life expectancy goes up. Yeah, I think, and a lot of these things that we consider indicators of how well our lives are is just bullshit. It's just how well are rich people doing. Dump more into his buddy's cup. That's exactly what the plan was. And don't get me started on, yeah. But here's the thing, it sounded good at the time, and I think her intentions were in place. A lot of times, specifically Black people of a certain status, respectability politics is really big in specific Black social circles. And so that was the ultimate respectability politics statement. They go, we're the bigger person. We're always the bigger person. We always turn the other cheek. Because we're going to win the moral argument. It's a very Aaron Sorkin-esque way of viewing politics, where the best argument wins and the person that's most morally right is always going to come out on top. Very Aaron Sorkin-esque, and that's not reality. Yeah, because they followed through and said, we have to be the bigger person. It's bullshit. I'm catching up. I'm getting there. And there's a lot of politicians like Hakeem Jeffries is still tied into that shit. Like, we got to be the bigger person. We have to look better, and we got to have the moral argument, win the hearts and minds, and understand that most people are amoral and self-interested, self-dealing. I felt bad for her, but when people asked her if she had changed anything for Biden, and again, you still have the job. You're still an employee. How would you do things differently than your direct supervisor? And it was already a White House that was fractured the way it rolled out. I don't necessarily know if pulling Biden off the ticket was a smart move, but in the hindsight, the panic was such that they went with it. This country, the way this country freaked out about Obama as a Black man, as a Black woman, man, you talk about a third, fourth, and fifth rail, like, it wasn't gonna happen. It was not in the cards. And I didn't, like, I tried to get my hopes up, but this country, the way this country reacted to a Black male, a biracial Black male at that, a light-skinned biracial Black male at that, being in the White House, you would have thought that we had put the reincarnation of Malcolm X in the White House. Like, they thought that, and putting a Black woman, they would have ascribed every negative trait that they had about Black women, and they did. You know, when she was young and single and dating, oh, she was promiscuous and all this other stuff. She was dating. She was a single woman in the political scene, you know, and wanted to invalidate all of her accomplishments. She didn't earn any of that stuff. She's smarter than most of the people that were in her orbit and most of the people that are in government now. She earned her station, but they ran down every single stereotype that they could use on her. I know that she was, if they were going to replace Biden on the ticket, she was literally the only candidate they could have run with. But America voting in a Black woman, man, that was the bridge too far, because I saw how they reacted after Obama. This country lost its collective fucking mind. She was also like, no, that's pandering. She had to pander to that side because because if she didn't, then they would have said she's weak on defense. And that's always been the smear against Democrats. They're weak on defense, even though Democrats allocate money towards defense the same way Republicans do. They wanted her to, and it was a damned if you do, damned if you don't. I do believe that there was some other stuff going on where they used the left's disaffection with the entire Democratic Party as leverage. I'll check it out. I'll definitely get on that one. the they go low, we go high thing. Like it's aspirational, and I think that's what it was. I think it's aspirational. It was an aspirational idea that we can appeal to the better nature of people, and I think it ignores the fact that sometimes there is no better nature to the person that you're. Sometimes what you see is what you get. They aren't better people. They're not bigger people. Yeah, it was incredibly naive. Yeah, all she had to do was will improve on some things. But I mean, you're standing next to your actual boss, bro. Like, I think that was the thing. Like, she was still in the job. She still was in the job. So she still had to perform the job of vice president. She didn't resign. Like, if she had resigned as vice president, and I think whoever would have been the next person to step up to fill in her seat, then she could have probably really built her own platform. But as long as she still holds the title, she still had to go through a lot of the ceremonial shit. It was a really weird, unprecedented situation. It was so people said a president runs with 10 years timeline. She had 3 months. Yeah. And again, I don't think that I was back when I said they're making a mistake. They're making a mistake with, and a lot of it had to do with the power brokers. Like when George Clooney is one of the power brokers in the Democratic Party, the party is cooked, bro. And I don't even have an issue with George Clooney like that, but George Clooney is one of the power brokers, bro. What are we doing out here? Who are you listening to right now, bro? And unfortunately, a lot of the political insiders who were part of Biden's campaign and Harris's campaign were the same inside the Beltway white dudes that were inside of a bubble. And unfortunately, a lot of liberal folks get in their own bubbles, and they aren't really receptive to information that challenges their bias. See, it's aspirational. I'm not mad at her. I really feel bad for her. I'm kind of tired of Democrats pandering to the right instead of the left. KKK members aren't going to vote for you. Right. There's an obsession, and I've been saying this. Actually, I think this got me. I think I got banned on X for this around election time. But there is a group of white Republican voters that are perfectly fine with setting themselves on fire as long as they get to touch and burn a black person. Working class voters, white working class voters that the Democratic Party has been chasing and chasing and chasing for the last 60 years, and they never catch them. It's like Tom and Jerry. It's like the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. They're never going to catch them. They're never going to appeal to them. They don't even try, but they're going to keep trying because for them, they're trying to redeem their racist parents and redeem their racist uncles. That's what the fascination is. Maybe there's hope for my racist grandpa. There's no hope for your grandpa's going to just be racist. There's no redemption arc for him. But that's what they're pursuing. And so they pursue a lot of white working class people and dump and waste resources as opposed to mobilizing the people that would actually be inclined to vote for them. Oh, Vance is an asset, bro. Vance is a asset for Peter Thiel, bro. And I don't think when Trump when that day comes, I don't think Vance is going to be able to lead the party. I don't think he has a personality, so to speak of. I think everything he's done has been engineered by Peter Thiel, and he's not going to be able to control this group of people. And nobody's asking Vance what's wrong with Trump. Nobody's asking him. Everybody knows it. Like, he's an adult old man who shits his pants all the time and wears an adult diaper. And has been wearing an adult diaper since the late 90s. And shits his pants out of anger and out of excitement and frustration. Old pill head who has incontinence issues and can't talk in a straight line. But nobody asked JD Vance what's going on with him. JD Vance probably avoids him at all costs. I can guarantee you he probably makes sure that he's in a different room when dude's around. The right wing does have the same bubble, but I think the difference is the right wing has Right wingers love falling in line for whatever reason. They'll tell you that they're rebels and everything, but there's nothing better for them than falling in line and towing the party line and holding their nose and voting for a candidate they do not like. I am living that right now in the state of Nebraska because Pete Ricketts gets elected, gets in office, and nobody fucking likes him. I don't know a single person that likes him on the left or the right, but somehow, some way, he keeps getting into office here, and everybody hates his guts. They will hold their nose and vote for a Republican just because Trump tells them to. I wish they would ask Vance, but a lot of people know the Trump administration is either going to lose or they're going to cheat. I think that they're trying to end elections as it is. I think he was very serious. I think he had a moment of clarity when he said, "You vote for me, you'll never have to vote again." I think that he means it. Yep. Oh, I am sorry. Yeah. People like in Midwestern, like when you're in the Midwest, and I need to say this to you. I need to say this to people. When you're in a state like Nebraska or Kansas or North or South Dakota, the exception was South Dakota with Christie Nome. Really, all you got to do is be a boring conservative white dude, and you're going to win the governor seat. You're going to win every senator's race. All you got to do is just be a boring white, like a boring white dude, uninspiring, but you're willing to spout the same talking points, and you're going to win most elections. That is the secret hack. The reason it sounds like I'm hard on, I think the reason it sounds like I'm not hard on the right is I really don't want to mess this up for us. If we don't win 2028, it's over, guys. That's why I'm so critical of Democrats. And since I'm in left of space, I have to be a Democrat. I do think, and I get it. I understand where you're going with it. I do think that it ends up being a reaction though, because then it becomes we dump exclusively on Democrats. Meanwhile, the Republicans have literally just rigged the Supreme Court for the next 40 years, and they've just sent every black person in the Deep South back pre-civil rights era. And there's not enough criticism leveled at them. I think that you're going to need people that fight in the mud as much. And I'm going to tell you this. I'm going on record as saying this. As a former Republican, I can tell you, it's my job to show you the evils of the Democrat. Listen, as much as I loathe myself for saying this, I think Gavin Newsom's going to end up being the candidate. He's probably going to be the person that ends up being in the White House. I hate the fact that came out of my mouth. But he is them. He is a left version of them. He even looks like old boy from American Psycho. Whatever the fascination is with people who look like American Psycho is with the American population where we put them in office, he looks like Norman Bates from American Psycho, and we're going to put him in office. And people will love him for it. I think that's going to end up being the candidate because he plays just like they do. He does the same things they do. He's aggressive and just as belligerent as they are when it comes to stuff. The only thing that's going to derail him is the invariable, sexual misconduct claim that's is going to come down because that's what guys like him do. People here hate Roger Marshall. Like people here hate Jim Pillen, the governor. Like, okay, our governor. All right, so the governor here has a big pig farm. Like that's what his family does. Pillen family pig farms. A 17-year-old kid died on that pig farm, suffocated because he didn't have a respirator, and they had him putting in insulation in one of the coops, one of the pens or whatnot. And not only did they get OSHA to look the other way, they covered the whole damn thing up. And autopsy records were just disappearing and everything. Like it was a lot of really dark shit. He killed a 17-year-old kid. He poisoned an entire town with pig shit in their water. They still voted for him. Nobody likes him here. But somehow he's going to win the office. He's going to be governor again. Why won't the Democrats say hypocrisy for Republicans? I don't know if they can. Because there comes like, okay, this is just my take on it. So when we talk about how the parties are arranged, how the parties are aligned, right? The Democrats have a pretty diverse coalition of people, even though people complain about it's just a duopoly and all this other stuff. They're a pretty diverse coalition of thought and people, right? And they don't toe the line really well. They don't toe the party line really well unless you're dealing with the higher operatives in the party. And I think that's why they lose, because the Republicans will hold their nose and vote for somebody they absolutely despise just because they're a Republican. Democrats will not do it. I think it's Mark Kelly. You think Mark Kelly's? He could. I could see it. I think it's going to be Newsom. He'll win everything. Pretend. Yeah. 4 more years, we're back to Republic, because that's the ebb and the flow of things. The only way that the Democrats can retain that power consistently is they're not very good at building their next leader. They're not really good at grooming the next person that's going to be the next person to step up, because they have there's this weird moral argument. Like I said, J.D. Vance was an empty fucking suit. He came out of nowhere. He wrote that book where he cosplayed as a poor person. You got to pretend like he's a poor person. Oprah, whatever reason, the right wing grifter pipeline on Oprah is wide the fuck open. And so all you got to do is just be a right wing grifter, and you're gonna back in the days, Oprah was gonna elevate you. And but JD Vance had no personality. But they dumped a bunch of money into him and built a whole narrative around him, and that's how he became a viable political candidate. The Democrats don't really do that well. We're still stuck. See how long it took to get Pelosi to move aside, bro. Like, it was crazy. Some of the things Republicans do are so insane. I can't even say why Trump sent the military. He did it as a show of force. He did it to, again, I think people mistake the ICE when he rolled out the military and stuff like that. That was a show of force to those blue states. But I also think that the ICE surge around the country, that's a show of force. He has a private army. You notice we don't see no Proud Boys running around here anymore. We don't see Patriot Front doing a lot of stuff because they got jobs with benefits with ICE. And they're basically a private army that's loyal to him. That's the play, and that's where it's going to go. Oh, blue for 2026. Yeah, but the Blues got to do something with it, man. Like, they can't get it and shit it down their leg like they've done it in other times where, you get this blue wave and you try to flip the Senate and Congress, which hasn't happened. I mean, that's been a long time, but there's so much joy about how they got it. That's kind of what happened to Obama. There's so much joy and fever that he kind of squandered the first year that he was in office because it was still riding the hype train, and then they didn't necessarily come in with a plan to execute on the stuff that he was doing. My point is the Democrats keep getting blamed and demanded to fix the Republican Party's crimes. And I think that's the problem. They don't point and say, this is they created this mess. The Republicans have no compunctions about making everything the Democrats' fault. The Democrats, they don't like doing that. Worry about that potential future. Tell me what the YouTube video is, because I can't necessarily click on it. You may be able to click on it on the live stream, but I can't click on it here for whatever reason. Marshall looking like a bitch. Yeah. Go ahead and vote Gavin in the primaries. There's a primary happening right now. We got to vote in 2026. I think that that's the big thing. Here's the play, though. They're trying to purge as many black and brown votes as possible around the country. And so, and there's so many candidates that are sitting there just tearing each other down and stuff. It's going to be hard to have a viable field that people are going to vote for in 2028 after they shit on everybody's name in 2026. Yeah, more about the National Guard, but Um, I think it still was a show of force. I think it was trying to get them to knuckle under. And a lot of the GOP states were the ones that sent their National Guard troops to, is almost swearing fealty to Trump. And they offered their National Guardsmen up to do it. Can't believe it. I think it was they were, they were sent up as they were sent up as bannermen, or like some Game of Thrones shit where, the Knights of the Vale will fight for Donald Trump. That's how the National Guard was really used. And a lot of Republican governors let their National Guardsmen be used in that manner. I know Nebraska did. I know that they did. And there's really no reason for it except as a show of force. Just like the 4th of July parade where we're marching around with tanks. It was the saddest looking shit I'd ever seen in my life. But we were doing that, marching next to tanks and everything. And now we're about to have a UFC fight on the front lawn of the White House. Like, this is idiocracy. It's all about looking strong while being weak. The man shits his pants. He's not a tough guy. Yeah. Women's votes are going to matter too. I think the biggest problem is, and I think the thing that's going to have to flip is, because during the last election, the demographic that really that didn't show up and show out were white women, because and it's not saying it's some universal thing. The numbers bear it out. They still went for Trump, and we got to figure out what that was about. There's so much stuff Trump has done. For example, the big beautiful bill. He's doing whatever he wants to. This is not governance anymore. We're living in a Trump run monarchy. That's what we're experiencing right now. We're in a Trump run monarchy right now. So, real quick before I pivot 100% into something else. Oh, let me throw this one in here. Not socialism and the Republicans before where I went to meet Trump. Okay, there's a strategic reason why, because there's a lot of older Democrats that will not vote for anything that's socialist, even though they love socialist policies. They won't vote for anything named socialist. They won't do it. And it's being cognizant of how we're labeling things and how we're presenting them, because that's where I think a lot of leftists fail. It's not understanding that sometimes you have to trick people. Sometimes it does come down to semantics. Yeah, Cuban Americans will not fuck with a socialist. They won't vote for a socialist. They love the socialist policies. They will not vote for a socialist. And that's because that label's been misattributed so many times. But I know that my mom grew up during the Red Scare as a black woman. She grew up during the Red Scare. There's no way she was going to vote for a socialist. Just, it wasn't going to happen. So you got to relabel it. But I think there's a level of obstinance that comes in the left where it's like, no, I'm really a socialist. That's not going to work. It's being comfortable with saying everything but socialist, saying the policies, listing out the policies that you have in mind, just avoiding the word socialist, because there are people that will not vote for it. And if you know the racial dynamics of how Cuba, the Cubans in Miami actually work, it's one of the more hostile places towards black people that you're going to find in the country. Because there's a lot of colorism and a lot of things from against Afro-Cubans, and people don't understand that when we talk about colonization and slavery, there were white Cubans and there are black Cubans. Who do you think were the slave owners? Who do you think was oppressed? Who do you think got ran out of the country and came to the United States? That's what their politics is. The white Cubans typically were the ones that came here. And they were the landowners. They were the rich. They were the rich class of Cubans. And if you say anything socialist to them, they will not fuck with you at all. Like Michelle Wu, she won't call herself a socialist ever, which is smart politically. But she's basically a socialist. But that's how they got to start thinking like that. Like we got to start, you got to start appealing to where people are instead of trying to elevate them to where you want them to be politically. You got to reach people where they are. And sometimes you got to leave them where they are at and say, it's not the right time. We'll come back for you. We'll improve society and make everything better. And you'll continue to vote against it. We just have to hedge against you. But also the ones that are more Batista supporters. That was Marco Rubio and his parents. He didn't come over because of Castro. He came over, I think his family were Batista supporters. He tries to pretend like it was, but he came over before Castro. His family came over well before Castro. Bad pigs happen. There's a lot of, sometimes you gotta be, yeah. If I would get free housing and healthcare, I don't care what it's called. And if you live in a farm belt state, you get socialism all the time if you're a farmer. Ooh, they get real good socialism. But you tell them, you tell them, hey, you're gonna vote for a social candidate, then people will beat you to death with with a farm tool. But nobody gets more socialism than farmers in the Midwest. Nobody. They get low interest. They get the lowest interest loans. They get the best terms on every loan that they ever. Nobody gets better terms on loans than farmers. They get all kinds of free money. They get money to not grow shit. They get all kinds of socialism. But don't you tell them about socialism because they won't vote for you. Yeah, and I think, but that's the issue. A lot of people do, and so I think you got to give them the policies, but name it something else. Yeah. Oh, that's what I meant. The Rubios came over before the revolution. Yeah, he's full of shit. He had no connection with the Cuban Revolution or anything. His family ran before, and they were rich. I'm in Kansas. Privatize the subsidies, socialize the welfare. Farmers get a lot of free shit, bro. And we sit around and pretend like they don't. Like, here's the thing. This is one of the biggest things. A lot of times we'll sit there and talk. They'll talk, when people who aren't in these states don't understand. Farmers are some of the richest families you're going to find in these states. But their money is spread out on very expensive pieces of equipment and tracts of land. But I mean, it's like the average net worth of a farmer is like $1 million or something like that. Farmers are doing fine in most cases. Yeah. And let's see, it's not even the farmers. Throw this in. It's people who profit off the farms. Yeah. That's true. And the corporate farms are part of the game too. The left needs to evaluate the side. Evaluate the side that tries to remove themselves the labels. So I can attack on them personally. Yeah. Because I think it's again, it's the theater of having good politics. And I think that's one of the things that damages the left and liberals. They fall into the camp too. It's the theater of having good politics. Having the right politics as opposed to having effective politics. Those two things aren't the same thing. So, real quick. Can we do an ADHD thing? I got this on my agenda. I got some other stuff I was going to talk about, but I did want to tonight sit down and kind of talk about that late diagnosis of ADHD and what that looks like as an adult, and some of the grief that kind of came along with it. The purity games are the worst things. That's the thing, because again, it goes back to I have to look morally correct as opposed to being correct. Weirdest shit ever. And I think, unfortunately, as a society, there are people that organize themselves around what they politically believe, and they have to fight 10 toes down, put 10 toes down, and fight to the death on stuff, just so that they can look like they have the right politics. It's the weirdest shit. I've seen a lot of leftists tie themselves in knots with that stuff, and it's like you make it so that you actually become ineffective. because you're so obsessed with having the right policy. I think a lot of the stuff around Palestine really exposed a lot of that stuff because, yes, it's a genocide going on in Palestine, but in this country is also political suicide to go up against the Israel lobby. It's just not going to happen. And no serious candidate for a major public office like the president, even senators to a degree, like you're not gonna, you make an enemy of the Israel lobby, you don't have a real shot at any kind of major political office. It's just not in the cards for you. And so there's a level of politics that you have to play when you get up to those higher levels. And I think there is a misunderstanding of how the power, how the game, how the dynamics work once you get in the beltway in the left, because the left has never really been in the beltway. Like they've never really had to work there and navigate through beltway politics. So that's just my take on it. So I'm skipping a segment. I'll save it for next week about Marvel and DC and black characters and stuff. I do want to talk about one of the things for late diagnosed ADHD folks and the achievement gap, because I kind of hit the wall this week with that and wondering. I think a lot of people that are late diagnosed with ADHD go through this process where you get the diagnosis and you're happy because it answers some questions that are burning in your mind, but then also you're grieving a lot of missed opportunities. Where would I have been if I got diagnosed, or if I had this diagnosis when I was a kid? If I had the treatment when I was a kid, what would I be doing right now? And there's a layer of grief that comes along with it. What I've accomplished. I watched a lot of my peers go off and have fantastic success in all these different fields. Me, while I've been struggling with X, Y, and Z, what would my life look like if I actually got the treatment when I needed it to? Okay. And for some people, ADHD affects academic achievement. It didn't affect me my academically until I got to my upperclassmen years in high school, and I actually had to lock in. And then I was still able to make the grade, but college I hit a brick wall. Um, but research links ADHD with lower income and workforce productivity loss. Just because if you don't have an understanding of your diagnosis, you can't calibrate and make your work flow for you, if that makes sense. Once I got my diagnosis, I was able to set up systems that allowed me to succeed. And I got written up for some of the things that I set up that allowed me to succeed, but it still gave me a measure of success. When I came off my meds cold turkey, all that shit went out the window. And went back to the struggle bus again. But um, ADHD limits your income as an adult because you spend so much time figuring out how to work correctly. And that's kind of the struggle I went into. I'm like, where would I be right now? I would have had a couple of books published. Um, you know, I would have gone back and got my master's and a couple of other things that I was holding off on just because I didn't know how my attention was going to work with some of this shit. Um, and it was kind of this grief thing. Um, and when I look at my resume is pretty highly accomplished. By the time I was 36, I accomplished everything that there was to do in my career, aside from being the CEO of a major nonprofit organization. But I always felt like I had been behind. And unfortunately, I picked a career path where you didn't make money consummate with what your title was. I was a director, um, doing director level things with, dozens of direct report staff across multiple shifts. And I wasn't even out of $50,000 range yet, just because the field I picked wasn't necessarily paying that well because I was working with kids. Yeah. I didn't fully catch that, Maddie. Sorry. Hey, you're telling me. Yeah. It was the weird grief and feeling like I had failed all these things. When I look back on my resume, I never got fired from a job, and every move, I say 95% of my job moves were promotions. I just felt like a big ass failure because I get in the job, struggle, figure out how to do it, and then I'm on to the next one. So the public resume is what people see, jobs, family, survival skills, accomplishments, business projects, and stuff like that. The visible resume is what it costs you to get to that place. Sleepless nights, um, feeling like I was a failure most of my life. Yeah. And my imposter syndrome is a weird beast because I tell people I have had a strong negative inner voice since I can remember. And it screams at me all the time and tells me I'm a failure, tells me I'm fucking things up and stuff like that. And I've kind of learned in order to get where I want to be with my negative inner voice, um, I have to basically do the opposite of what my negative inner voice tells me. So if it tells me I can't do it, I go out and try the thing. That's the way I've learned how to deal with it. But I know for a lot of people that the level of negativity that my inner voice speaks over me is absolutely like it's soul crushing sometimes. I've just learned how to navigate it. And feeling highly accomplished, being highly accomplished and feeling like a complete fraud, like the other shoes about to drop and stuff like that. That's just common for me, you know. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people who have ADHD and have other neurodivergence, especially if you're late diagnosed, you've created a bunch of scripts in your brain that kind of emphasize, hey, I'm gonna try this. I'm probably gonna fail at it. And that's how you approach things. This thing I'm doing is probably gonna turn out badly. And that's how you approach things, as opposed to I'm gonna go have good success with this thing. Okay. And so in order for me to have all the public success, I ended up basically uh, rolling the dice, going on the highest dose of my medication, not necessarily allowing for any adjustments of my medication because I thought since I was being productive that it was the right mix as opposed to what I'm on now, which is the right mix, where I still retain the elements of my personality that my family likes and my wife loves. Um, I wasn't amenable to that. I was so focused on, I have to climb the career ladder. I have a limited amount of time on this planet. And I was willing to give up years of my life to make sure that I climbed to where I wanted to go so I could set my family up where I wanted to be. And at the end of the day, it took my wife kind of telling me, I don't care about all that stuff. I need you and I need you back because the medication dose I had been on zombied me out and it made me into a person she didn't necessarily recognize. But I had locked in, like, I will lay down my life to make sure that my family is in a better position. And so it shaved some years off my life because I was on the highest dose of the meds available, and it wasn't necessarily healthy for me where I was. But I wasn't willing to roll the dice on trying another formulation. That was completely on me. But that was the internal resume. That's the thing I sacrificed was years off my life. Um, And a lot of times when you look at it, like people look at what my resume is and like, damn, your resume is really, really impressive. And it is. I don't see it as impressive because I have a hard time recognizing when I've done something good because I just expect it out of myself and I never take time to celebrate my wins. It's hard for me to be happy with my wins when I do something successful. It really is because I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, y'all. Um, and that's not a good place to be. And a lot of it comes from the ADHD side of things, where I had something wrong with my brain, not wrong with my brain, but my brain functioned differently. And I just thought I was crazy. From basically from the time I was like, from the time I was probably in fifth grade all the way up until being 32 years old. I thought I was crazy. And I just accepted the fact that I was crazy. I was talking to my sister yesterday about her imposter syndrome. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got it. I think we're kind of at a threshold with the stream. Like, I don't know. I haven't done a really long stream like this in a while, so I don't know. But yeah, imposter syndrome is a crazy thing. It's a liar. and it wants you isolated and wants you alone so it can grab you, have you to itself and smother you to death. And that's how imposter syndrome works. But the reality is charlatans and bullshit artists don't suffer imposter syndrome. I think imposter syndrome for me specifically is born out of trying to be overly accountable for outcomes and trying to take ownership for outcomes that I had no control over, especially when they're negative. The good ones are just going to happen. That's how all the good ones. That's just pure blind luck. But the bad things are all my fault, and that's how my brain has worked. Yeah, and so for me, again, and maybe give this to your sister and see if she can try it. Do the opposite of what your imposter syndrome tells you that you can't do. If your imposter syndrome says you can't do this, and go out and prove it wrong. I've had more success in my life doing that than anything else. My imposter syndrome told me that I can't get in front of the camera because I can't, because I have the circumstantial speech that comes with ADHD, where I meander and ramble on points because I have a need to be understood. And so I over explain everything. My imposter syndrome said I couldn't do live streams. So I went out and did them. It makes my life, that's how I view it. It may be, it works for me. And she may have some luck with it. And if you have ADHD out there, if you got a strong negative inner voice and you struggle with imposter syndrome, do the opposite of what your imposter syndrome tells you you can do. She's in college and raising her son. I've been helping her edit her paper. She was feeling bad and suddenly realizing how much she doesn't know. But and I know this from being a trainer, that's actually part of the learning process. You're actually learning when you realize what the edges of your knowledge are, where the edges of your knowledge reside. If you're aware of the edges of your knowledge and you weren't before, you're actually learning. That's a good thing because you realize how much you don't know. That's the challenge because you feel stupid all of a sudden, but that's really part of the learning process. It's an important part of the learning process. You learn where your knowledge ends. Because people that don't know and people that aren't learning, they never know where their knowledge ends. That's everyone. I told her that too. LOL. Yeah. Told her it's good recognition. It's a tell. It means that you know more than you did before because you know how much you don't know. And that's not a bad thing. And I think a lot of times we get sold this myth of expertise and knowledge, specifically in our billionaire obsessed culture, where we assume that people that have more means, that have more money, know more than we do. The people that have better jobs than you assume that they know more than you do. But then when it comes to an expert, we assume that we know as much as they do because we have internet access. I think it learning shows you where your gaps in knowledge are, and that's not a bad thing, but it's a trick that your brain plays on you. Yeah. Tech bros are, they're smart sometimes they're smart in the areas that they need to be smart in. Sometimes a tech bro doesn't know anything about technology. They just know how this system works and how to get money for it. They're not the experts. A lot of times the ones that are really, really good at it are good at hiring people that are smarter than they are and then standing behind them and letting them do the work. You'll find as people move up through, the smartest people in an organization typically isn't the leadership. It's the people doing the most important work. Toxic STEM lords who popped up all over sites 15 years ago. Yeah. And now they're running into the natural buffer because there is a glut of them. And they never developed any other soft skills to use those STEAM powers. And so now they're struggling. They never developed any artistic frame to use those STEAM, all that STEM knowledge. Sorry, I said STEAM, all that STEM knowledge. They never learned any other applications of that STEM knowledge. Any artistic interpretations of it because they have no use for the arts. And so now they're struggling to find purchase. There's a lot of people that have fantastic tech resumes that can't find work. So they've been grifted and sold eugenics and craziness. Yeah, a lot of them will now they're on peptides. Like a lot of them are getting hustled by the peptide bros, Joe Rogan and the peptide mafia. They're getting hustled by them. You guys are most biologically advanced people ever. Yeah. I saw a couple that was like that, like this, these two nerds that have found each other. And they were convinced that their genes were so amazing that they just had to reproduce, and they were giving the world a gift of their genes and all this other shit. Um, I don't know if I told you the story. It's the ultimate ego boost. I didn't know if I told you the story. I was working in a group home when I was younger. That was my first real jobby job. And when you are in the gifted programs, you take a lot of those assessments and stuff like that. So I was reasonably aware of where my IQ was, right? And I was in like 145, something along those lines. And I had a kid, 145, 150, depending on what task I'm working on. And I had a kid in my group home. And the line that he came with was he was this brilliant kid. He had this high IQ. And the problem was he had watched A Beautiful Mind and decided that he had schizophrenia. But the only symptoms of schizophrenia that he ever manifested were the things that were shown in the movie. So it's kind of a hustle. Anyway, his parents were really locked into high IQ stuff and always led with conversations about their IQ. And I don't know how it came down, but me and him were kind of talking, and I'm trying to do a little bit of uh, teaching socially to interact with people, and saying that it's kind of that's not normal conversation to sit around and talk about your IQ to other people. And then I use myself as an example, like, bro, um, you know, your IQ is like, I think it was like 130 or 135. I'm like, my IQ is like 145, 150, depending on task, what cognitive task I'm working on. He's like, what? Like, yeah, it is. I mean, doesn't mean anything. I'm still working in a group home. Um, it just means that I am able to connect patterns and things a little bit better and things like that. I said it's not something I lead with, and it's not something I talk about often, but it's something I got. And so he told his parents, and then after that, his parents never talked to me again. They didn't want to talk to me. They felt threatened. It was a weird thing because they had led their entire lives to believe that their IQ had made them unique and special. And here's this black guy working in a group home with their kid who has a higher IQ than both of them. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. But they've been led to believe that tech mafia has been led to believe that they're unique and different and amazing and stuff. And a lot of it has to do with the media culture around it. Oh yeah. Was it Peter Thiel's parents left, was it Germany? It was like grandparents or something left Germany to go to South Africa because there's a little farmstead where they could all be Nazis together. Weirdo shit, bro. The fact that this man is in control of all their surveillance, he's probably why. Hey, Peter, how's it going? I know you're probably, if you care, you're probably watching it. We mentioned you, and Palantir is going to direct this feed to you. So if it's coming straight in your living room, what's up, man? Send me some money. But it's yeah. IQ is IQ is pseudoscience. All it does is recognize how quickly you recognize patterns. Like that's really what it is. It's pattern recognition. And some people who are low IQ actually have high IQ and specific functions and things that they do. It doesn't mean anything. It's not a predictor of anything. But for a lot of people, that's the only thing that makes them special in their mind. And so that's what they lead with. I find a lot online and online discourse, especially on that Nazi platform, Twitter. A lot of those guys will sit there and brag about their IQ and how big brain they are and how small IQ people are X, Y, and Z. It's really stupid because it doesn't mean anything. So, um, And that was part of the problem with my late diagnosis, is like gifted kid and all the gifted programs. And I got to be an adult and none of that shit mattered. And I felt like I was behind for most of my life. Yeah, it's all just grifting. That's really what it is. And because I mean, look at it like this. And then I probably got to leave off here because it's going on 10 o'clock. Um, uh, it's all kind of a bullshit game of um so they could sell you stuff so that you can feel like you're special, you're a unique special little butterfly. um you know and they sell IQ tests where now you can get your IQ test online, but then they lock it behind a paywall, right? um they sell you all this biohacking stuff that really could just be anything in a pill, anything that's in a capsule, right? um when you talk about cults, um, typically the people that are more susceptible to cults are intelligent people. Like intelligent people who get pulled into cults all the time because cult leaders are really effective at making showing distinctions between patterns. And unfortunately that entraps their brain. And so it's all grifting. All this IQ stuff and all this stuff is just grifting. And a lot of times, because we're in this inshitification world where we haven't had tech reasonably, like we haven't had a tech innovation that actually improved our lives in a while. We have had plenty that drained our pockets, uh, gave us something else to buy, but none that have measurably improved our lives in any way, shape, or form in a while. And I think that's just kind of part of how it is. Um, you know, we keep watching Elon take credit for inventing shit that's already existed, and people are like, "Well, he's the smartest man in the world" and stuff, and it's like, yeah, but he just has money and knows, let me buy this electric car company, and then we're going to turn it into a carbon credits company, and that's how we're going to make our money. And now that the carbon credits are drying up, people are wondering how is Tesla have this high value, high valuation, and they still can barely get enough cars on the road to satisfy their customer base. Yeah, Elon's not, he just knows how to, he has money. Money is the best superpower in the world. It's the best superpower. Money is an incredible superpower. When you have money, people think you're the most brilliant person they've ever encountered. Money is amazing. Money can turn the dumbest guy that you know into Tony Stark. Because you got money. You can go out and fuck things up and have the money to make your fuck up look like a victory. Money is incredible, bro. Like we talk about superpowers. I would love to have the superpower of money, bro. Yeah. And they've even had to add nuances to Batman now because people are like, he's just rich. And so they've had to make him poor again. Matter of fact, the most interesting version of Batman is the one that grew up with one parent surviving and grew up middle class. Like absolute Batman is more interesting than rich Batman ever was. It is what it is. But yeah, money is just amazing. Like money can give you all kinds of other, like it gives you access, it gives you knowledge that people don't have, put you in contact with people that you would never meet. Money is incredible. Like that's the superpower I want. Not super strength, just give me money. So anyway, we're about 2 hours and 18 minutes in. This was a long one. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks, Maddie. I love having you on the stream. Funny thing is, I don't have money. But if you got it, it will be like a superpower. Like it would be like the bolt of lightning that hit the Flash in the chemical lab, and it just gives you powers and abilities. Gives you the ability to do stuff. And I met a lot of people, and it makes it a lot easier. Yeah, money makes things a lot easier. Like there are things that suck, but they suck a lot less when you have money. We have enough money. Like this sucks, but at least I'm rich and this will be over soon. And then I'll still have my money after the fact. I don't know if that's an indictment on the state of society or not. But anyway, um, I do appreciate you tuning in. Thanks, Maddie. I always love having you on the stream. Thanks for everybody that's tuned in. Next week we're going to be talking some comic books. Be catching you up on where I am in the Dark Tower universe. And be talking about some stuff I want to do. A new position that I want to create for myself in the comic book industry. And so Dave Chappelle, look at Dave Chappelle, he's got money. And now people listen to him even though he talks nonsense half the time. Yeah, I think right now Dave is kind of come back from smelling his own farts and is back to is trying to get back to the old comedy thing. I think for a while he got caught up in with Dave. I feel like he ended up getting caught up in having all the money and everything. And I think there was kind of something happened in his life where he's kind of coming back and saying, wow, this is really not who I wanted to be for all this time. But he has to mend all the bridges that he burned for acting like acting the way he has been for the last couple of years. But anyway, so next week I'll be back. I'm about to finish The Wastelands by the third book in the Dark Tower series, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll be moving on to the next one. I think that's the Song of Susanna, if I'm not mistaken. I got to double check. I don't know where I'm at. Oh, no, that's The Wizard in the Glass. And so I'll be talking about that one. I wanted to talk a little bit about Black and brown communities within comic books and how there hasn't been representation on that. And so I'll have a fully fleshed out idea about that next week. And maybe talk a little bit about Shiloh Norman, a little bit more about Shiloh Norman, the third Mr. Miracle. So I got a lot on this, Hank, for next week. I do appreciate y'all tuning in. Maddie, thanks for tuning in. And I will talk to you guys. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.